Hello everyone and welcome to my kitchen. Tonight I am making cast iron pizza, one of my favorite things to make. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Now before we get started on the actual pizza part, I also want to show you my recipe for pizza dough. It's really simple, it's kind of foolproof. So if you want to learn how to make pizza dough, then you can watch me do it here. If you don't want to make your own dough, which is perfectly fine, or if you're scared of making your own dough, then of course you can just pre-purchase some at the store and that will work just as well for your cast iron pizza. So for our crust, we are starting off with 2 3/4 cups of bread flour. Now, I'm using bread flour in particular here. You can use all-purpose flour, but the reason that the bread flour is better is it has more proteins in it, which is going to give us a better gluten structure. So, traditionally you want your pizza crust to be a little bit chewy. That's going to happen here in this with the bread dough. If you use an all-purpose flour, you'd need to knead it a little bit longer to get those gluten strands built up to the same texture, basically. So what we're going to do is add into our flour a teaspoon of salt. And the salt we're going to put on one side of the bowl, because yeast doesn't like salt. So salt and yeast are going to kind of work against one another, whereas yeast really likes sugar. Now, I don't use sugar in this recipe, but essentially what I'm saying is you want to keep the salt away from the yeast as long as possible until we've got all the rest of our ingredients in here. So now we're going to add our yeast in, which we're using 1 1/4 teaspoon of yeast. So the yeast is going on the other side of the bowl. And then we're going to add in, straight into the middle here, 2 tablespoons of olive oil. 1 and 2. And then I've got 1 1/4 cups of water. I'm going to start with just about 3/4 cup of water and see how this comes together. And if it is too dry, then we'll go ahead and add in the remaining liquid. So I've got my dough hook on my KitchenAid here, and I'm just going to go ahead and let it mix everything together. Welcome back, everyone. So my dough is ready here. Now I did end up adding about, let's see, I started with 1 1/4 cup of water. I probably have about 1/8 of a cup left in my measuring cup. Now I did add just a hair too much. If you find that this happens with you and you go from too dry to too wet, then what you want to do is just add in a little handful of flour in there to get it to the right consistency. Now what you're looking for here is you want it to be a relatively smooth dough, and you don't want it to be shiny and sloppy and wet. Like when it's wet, it's like shiny and gross. So you don't want that. You want it to be a relatively smooth dough. You can continue to knead this by hand if you want to, but once it's all come together in a dough, then what we're going to do at this point, is go ahead and let it rise. I like to use just a pan release spray just to make it easy on myself. So I just use the same bowl that I mixed it in and just plop that in there. And then I'm going to cover that loosely with plastic, and we're going to let this sit at room temperature for about 6 to 8 hours at least. That'll help to develop the flavor and help it to rise. When your dough has risen, it should look like this, about doubled in size and kind of light and fluffy. So we're just going to pull this out, and we're going to take our cast iron skillet here. This is going to give us a lovely crust. And just do a drizzle of oil on the bottom. You don't want to do too much. You can kind of move it around so it coats the pan. But you don't want a lot of oil in there because it's going to make it really greasy if you do a lot. So we just want enough to give us a nice good crust and help this not to stick on our pan. So this is the really fun part. You just plop it in your pan and start stretching it out. And honestly, this dough feels so good. It's so nice and stretchy.
Oh, it does feel good.
It does, doesn't it? It's
feels
nice
like Play-Doh.
Nice and pillowy. Yeah, this is basically adult Play-Doh at this point.
Edible Play-Doh.
So you're just going to stretch until it fills your pan. You will see, as you probably can right now, that it kind of comes back like memory foam. You don't want to work with it too much, but just get it in there good. And of course, kind of press out from the middle so that the thick part is going to end up being your crust and not so much your bottom. And then go ahead in with your toppings. Meanwhile, preheat your oven to 500 degrees. You want it really nice and hot so that this gets a really good crust on it. And of course, toppings are completely up to you and what you want, how much you want. This is the fun part. And I like to, sometimes when I have people over, make these pizzas, but make them personal size so that everybody can do their own pizza and do whatever they'd like with it. So I'm just going to use some cheese on here. Of course, use whatever cheese you want. And some little baby pepperonis. And some banana peppers. All right, and this is going to go into our 500-degree oven for about 25 minutes until it's ready, and then I'll bring you back to show you. It's been about 25 minutes. I just took our pizza out of the oven. You want to give it about 5 minutes in the pan just to rest and kind of calm down from all that sizzling, and then just put this out on a cutting board and go ahead and slice it up. So that's our pizza. I hope you guys enjoyed. Bye-bye. You're so annoying.
Ugh.